do men cope with the vulnerability of dealing with their wife's illness?
I think that part of the tough place for a guy is that you are suddenly, you feel very vulnerable and you can't do what you think you're supposed to do as a guy, which is to protect your family and protect your loved ones. And I remember feeling very strongly that, I should find my wife's doctors and find the best cure for her and kind of put in a big box with a ribbon and give it to her and say, here, honey, I've solved the problem. And, many, many men I've interviewed for the book had that feeling that they have to fix it. And one thing that you learn quite profoundly through all this is that you can't fix cancer as the husband, and yet just by being there, by giving your wife support, and this would apply through treatment and after for sure, it's like by listening to her, by taking her seriously, by holding her hand in the waiting room, by taking notes in the doctor's office for whatever visit it is so you know what the doctor's saying, all these things really make you feel a little bit less vulnerable, that make you feel like, yeah, you're working as part of a team, you're dealing with this difficult disease, you're keeping, you're trying to cope as best as you can with what's happened to you. And then you also feel like even if you can't fix it, you're helping your wife. And I think all these help kind of calm down those feelings of vulnerability, because you just have to move forward. I mean, that's what we really learned with cancer too, that you can sit there and look back and worry like, oh, we should have done this, we should have done that. And I think that was one of the tough things for me too. I would just think, well, what if Marcia makes the wrong decision about treatment? What if she's having lumpectomies? What if she should have a mastectomy? What if she should have had this chemo cocktail instead of that chemo cocktail? And there are all these uncertainties that just eat away at you. And by learning to sort of trust your doctors and trust your wife's instincts, that helps you move forward, and I think also makes you feel a little bit less vulnerable.
Are there things that you would advise men going through this to not say? Are there kind of the big taboos?
I mean, the old cheer up, honey, is, so you sort of think as a guy your role should be to be a cheerleader for your wife, both during treatment and afterwards. And what I've come to understand, and what a lot of really wise people I've interviewed have said, is that, cheering somebody up doesn't really work. That if somebody has complicated emotions they're dealing with, you can't just say, oh, that doesn't mean anything, don't worry about it, put it aside. That you really have to sit there and listen and really listen empathetically. And it's tough for a lot of guys, but I think that's how you move forward. And for women who are able to express their whole range of emotions to their husband, I think that's incredibly helpful. I interviewed one psychiatrist who studied breast cancer patients and whether they bottle up their feelings or let their feelings out, and the women who let their feelings out coped better with the stress of treatment and the stress of the disease. And if the husband is always like, oh, cheer up, it's fine, doesn't mean anything, don't worry, then the woman might feel she doesn't have a right to those feelings, or she might feel like she can't be honest with her spouse, and I think that just can't be good for anyone or any relationship. I mean, I think you just have to be more flexible and more mellow and really listen to your wife and understand where she is. And I make a joke in my book that the breast cancer husband's motto should be shut up and listen, and I think that continues not only during treatment but after treatment, that you have to be willing to stop assuming that you know what's the right thing or the best thing to do, and really listen to your wife and understand, is she feeling very vulnerable and upset at this moment, or is she fine and we can move forward, and just kind of take your cues from her. The other thing you learn when you go through all this is that you're not going to do everything right. You're going to screw up, and that's the nature. I mean, there are mistakes that are made in marriage, and there are mistakes that are made, for sure, when you're suddenly thrust in this new role of being a cancer caregiver, and when treatment ends and you're like the post-cancer caregiver. And I think you just have to say it's perfectly normal to make mistakes, and to learn to say I'm sorry to your wife if you feel like you've been a real dolt, as some guys are. I mean, we call ourselves the fraternity of clueless breast cancer husbands, because many of us are clueless, and it's like we're not making mistakes maliciously or because we're mad. We just don't know what to do. And I think that's one of the important things, is to sort of understand that, yeah, it's okay, we'll make mistakes and then we'll move forward and learn from those mistakes.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about dads and what dads can do, and the role of not just being a husband, but how you can help children get it and how you can be supportive for your kids. A lot of times kids have a really hard time after their mom has finished treatment, and are there things that dads can do to help their kids ease the discomfort or pitch in more around the house?
Yeah, you don't want to assume that your wife is going to take up all the roles that she had before surgery, so I think that the dad does have to do a little bit more around the house for sure. And the dad can be a good go-to person for the kids. I mean, not to have daily briefings, but just every week or so, ask them how they're doing, ask them if they have any questions about mom, ask them if there's anything they want to talk about, and just kind of keep lines of communication open. And that can be very valuable to sort of understanding how the kids are feeling. Have they, are they back to their own normal, or do they still have worries inside? But I think kids are very resilient. I mean, the more of the issues I think would arise during treatment than after treatment.